Wait, what would it look like if the clans all got their own codexes? Wow! Welcome back to the Red Ones Go Fast, old Big Mek here, and it's time for a proper Zoggin Thought one, so put on your thinking caps and let's get into it. That's right, it is time for a little bit of a brain scratcher today. You see, I get asked all sorts of questions all over the place online because I'm very active, obviously, here on the YouTube community, but also in, Reddit and Discord and things like that. And one of the questions that I got asked recently is, with the advent of new chapter-specific codexes coming back for Beakies, for Space Marines, what do I think about Orks having the same thing for clans? And that was actually really thought-provoking. All right, for those of you unfamiliar, let me break it down for you. In our current codex here, you see we've got lore pages on the clans, such as the Bad Moons and the Death Skulls. And what we're talking about here are those getting broken out into their own actual codexes, not just detachments, but codexes. And that is not wholly unprecedented in Games Workshop's history. And I don't just mean with Beakies and Space Marines. Obviously, there has been a Codex Ultramarines before, and Blood Angels and Dark Angels and Space Wolves have always had their own thing. And every once in a while, you get some weird ones like Raven Guard and Imperial Fist kind of having their own deal. And with the advent of those kind of coming back, where GW is basically saying, hey, we're not just gonna do detachments, we're actually gonna do some little mini codexes for these other chapters, people start going, well, what about other armies? And well, good old Codex Armageddon here was the zeitgeist of that. You see in here, there was the Ork Cult of Speed. Now, this wasn't clan specific. Obviously, a lot of, speed freaks are evil sons, but by no means is it all. And so this was kind of more like a different detachment than a literal different army. But this wasn't the only army in this codex. In fact, one of the things that made it so cool is you had Armageddon Steel Legion, as well as Black Templars and Salamanders. So you got 4 different armies in this book, and especially getting the Black Templars and the Salamanders, those were 2 different divergent chapter codexes from regular Codex Space Marines, and it was really exciting for Beaky players to get those. Same thing with Steel Legion. At the time, there was Codex Imperial Guard, but Catachans actually had their own codex as well because they were so different than your regular Imperial Guard regiments. And Steel Legion was different as well because they were mechanized instead of having great big giant blobs of infantry, because back in that day, you had to have 2 10-man squads and a command squad to make a platoon as one troop choice. That was a lot of models. People were wanting to play with a mechanized force. You could take these Steel Legion guys and put 10 of them in a Chimera, and that was your troop choice. It was a very different thing. It was very cool. But yeah, Orks got these speed freaks, which were really, really rad. It was one of my favorite army list build things of all time. This is where I got my start in Orkdom and my love for all things red and fast. But since then, Orks haven't had any other type of thing outside of their regular codex. But again, these are not limited to Imperial forces and the 1 token Ork codex. You see, almost all the armies used to get different styles of builds as actual codices. In fact, that's where Genestealer Cult kind of got their start. They were like a sort of pseudo supplement to Codex Tyranids. I can't remember if they were in a White Dwarf or if they actually had a publication, but it was something like that, where it was like, hey, you could take all of these things from Imperial Guard, you could take these things from Tyranids, and you could make the Genestealers. Same thing with Adeptus Mechanicus. When they started coming out, they were just Skitarii, and you kind of added things in from other chapters, or not other chapters, other armies. So Games Workshop has a long history of this. It's also a great money-making scheme, and we all know GW is about them bucks. Basically, what it comes down to is, if we can sell you a supplemental codex, that's a second round of books that you're going to have to buy, which is really sleazy, but it's something that they do. More importantly, though, because people kind of get caught up on like, oh, they're making all this money on books. They're not really making all that much money on the books. Where they're really making the money is kit sales. Kit sales, kit sales, kit sales. Kit sales drive literally everything else. And so the more kits you can sell people, the better off they are on profit. That's why like Horus Heresy has been so great for them, is they have all of these supplemental kits for the main kit. You're buying all of these kits with custom shoulder pads, all of these kits with custom helmets, all of these kits with custom heavy weapons and things like that for every one of those squads, and that adds up really, really fast. They see the same thing in 40K. Yes, they release regular old bog standard Space Marines, but they release kits for Blood Angels and Dark Angels and Black Templar and Space Wolves and everybody else, and same thing on the Chaos side, right? Now you've got Emperor's Children's their own standalone thing. Death Guard have been a thing for a while now. World Eaters just got redone, all having chapter-specific kits. And what you're doing is you're enticing people who have a generalized army. They're like, oh, okay, like I've got Chaos Space Marines, and they got a little bit of everything. And then these new Slaneshi guys come out and they're like, ooh, I really like Emperor's Children stuff. They're going to go buy those kits. They're going to possibly buy that book. They're going to buy things to add into their army. Even if it's not necessarily the direction they want their army to go, the fact that they can use their base army as part and parcel of this other army gives them multiple options for play. So it makes sense to kind of have these things. They sort of maybe dipped their toes in the water with it with Orks with the advent of the Beast Snagas. Now, I've long said that Games Workshop totally screwed up even naming these guys Beast Snagas in the first place. They are very clearly Scar Boys. All of the lore lines up, all of their actual aesthetics line up with having all of the scars all over them, as well as the heavy dependence on cyborg parts. They've all got, you know, metal limbs, arms and hands and legs and like head plates and things like that. These guys are definitely Scar Boys. They should have just called them Scar Boys. They could have had Boar Boys and Squig Boys kind of be a thing. Maybe you get one boar in there and a couple of squigs, or, you know, something like that. And it would have been a lot more accepted by the old graybeards in the community. But all that being said, it was clear that Games Workshop was trying to create a whole nother avenue of Orkdom, and the way that they cleaved apart Orks in Age of Sigmar. You went from kind of having Orks to Orks and Goblins to Orks and Goblins and Swamp Orks to now Orks and Goblins and Swamp Orks and other Goblins, and they're really trying to like split the faction up. But what it's getting people to do is buy all these different Ork kits because they think they're all cool, or they want to be able to use them in multiple armies because they do share some basic kits, some basic, you know, troop choices and vehicles and things like that, and even things like the terrain. They've got that like cool Ork skull thing that's up on a tower that could be used by all sorts of different Ork clans. So again, you can see where they're going with 40K here, that if they made Beast Snagas their own thing with some crossover with regular Orks, you'd end up having two armies kind of for the price of one. But then, well, the whole thing kind of backfired on them. And don't get me wrong, it didn't backfire because of the name or the look or anything like that. It backfired because they came out with detachments. You see, when the Beast Snagas came out, there were detachments, but they were general. It wasn't army specific. So you had a standard detachment with your 6 troops and your 3 elites and your 3 fast attacks and your 3 heavy supports. And then you had like, oh, you could do this outrider detachment where it was 6 fast attacks and no heavy supports. Or you could do this like heavy support one that had 6 heavy supports and no fast attacks, etc., etc. They were all detachments based on the basic type of squad. Well, they decided to go away from that and into actual army-specific detachments, which are arguably a little bit cooler, even though they're also arguably Magic the Gathering with extra steps. But what it did allow Games Workshop to do is make for flavorful army builds with specific rules to buff or nerf things within that army to make something that is both thematic and fun to play, as well as like actually reasonably competitive. I don't mean like in a meta sense, but in a like general pickup game, beer and pretzels. You know, if you just kind of have your units and your opponent just kind of has their units, you're going to have a pretty even game and a pretty decent time. The problem with doing that is now you've made it a lot harder to split this army up into multiple armies. Let's take a quick break so I can talk to you about metal miniatures. Do you like metal miniatures? Do you like old school Warhammer? Do you want to win some cool old metal miniatures, such as this tank buster guy right here, who comes with the rest of his squad? Well, it's easy for you to do with our free old Big Mek's heavy metal paint contest. The rules are simple. Get yourself a metal figure, post a photo in our Discord, link down in the description below, always free. We have a little sub-Discord for the Heavy Metal contest. You post a before photo and then an after photo of it all painted, and that's it, you're in. And you can win all sorts of metal minis, like I said, including these tank buster guys. Now, does it have to be an orc unit? No, you can enter yourself a sweet old Chaos Beaky, such as this plasma gunner right here, or really anything else Games Workshop. Even if it's not Games Workshop and you're not sure, throw a picture up and tag me in it and let me see it, and I will let you know whether or not I will take it. I can tell you, so far every metal mini has been an absolutely yes, a-okay. Now, if you don't have your hands on a metal mini, but you do have a resin copy of a metal mini, that is also acceptable. Such as the current Weird Boy. He's very weird, he's very crappy, fine cast, and if you are willing to put up with that in order to enter the contest, you are in. If you've got any other questions, throw them down in the Discord, and I'm happy to answer them. But it's all about celebrating these older minis and adding them to your collection, doing something a little old school. Now, what if you want to enter more than once? Well, you can paint as many minis as you want, but you're only getting one entry through the painting competition. If you want more entries on top of that, you can visit our merch site at theredonesgofasta.com, where you can pick up this sweet shirt with artwork by BenBam, as well as all of our Red Squig merchandise, such as the water bottle and the cap that you saw me wearing earlier in the video. I can tell you, if you haven't been there recently, we have a whole bunch of new items, such as some lapel pins and a license plate for your speed buggy. So definitely go check out some of the new things. And there are other ways to support the channel as well, such as becoming a channel member here on YouTube, or joining me as a paid patron over on Patreon. Every month of your support for May, June, and July goes toward another entry to win sweet metal models. And these are just some of the metal models that you could win. We are going to have multiple winners. We will be giving all of these away in a live stream come August. So if Games Workshop were to actually come out with multiple codexes, or even just one additional codex for Orkdom, what would that even look like? Well, you could sort of see it maybe being based on the different clans, but again, with the advent of the new detachments and the advent of whatever you paint in your army not mattering anymore, I don't think that's going to happen. I think what you could see is something like that old Codex Armageddon. And maybe this time it won't be Speed Freaks, especially considering our buggies are, well, kind of awful and need a lot of help. But there is another way. You see, our good friend Uthak Blackhawk has been an absolute rising star, thanks to author Mike Brooks and the Brutal Cunning series, along with a bunch of other orc stories. We have some narrative moving forward with the Bad Moons absolutely causing havoc throughout the galaxy, including the dear Captain Badruck himself, which means we are primed and ready for a Bad Moon style detachment or a Bad Moon style codex. Could you imagine getting a new Captain Badruck model and actually being able to use him in the game as Captain Badruck, maybe getting new flash kits or new lutas or new mech guns or some other crazy mech monstrosity built and put together? That would be so rad, and it would be so different than the regular orc army, and it would allow them to come out with a Codex Bad Moon or something like that, and even put Uthak himself back in the game out of Legends and put him in as well, because that model, even though it wasn't sold for very long, is not actually that limited of edition, and they are totally able to make more of him as well. So we are really, really well primed to have an amazing DACA style detachment or even entire codex with all new characters, or returning characters I should say, but perchance all new models of returning characters, as well as, again, new machinery, new rules, things like that. Could you imagine Shootaboys and Sluggaboys becoming two different actual data sheets again? That's how it used to be back in the day. They were totally different squads. Could you imagine Ard Boys making a comeback? Those are your regular Orc boys with a 4-up armor save because they've scavenged a bunch of armor for themselves. Those are the kind of things that they could put into a different Orc supplemental codex and get some more teeth out of all of us, because we're gonna want it, not need it. We're just gonna buy it because it's really cool. All right, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on a potential another Ork Codex. Is that something that you would actually like to see? Would you actually go buy another Codex or more model kits if they came out? Or would you prefer it was like just a detachment, but maybe still give us the models and the rules? Let me know what you think. I am super excited for it. I think it would be great if Games Workshop got out of this rut of just Space Marines or Chaos Space Marines and brought some more of this flavor and some more of this like actual secondary armies back for the other races, especially the Xenos. Lord knows I miss my Craft World's Eldar as well. All right, that's going to do it for this one. We'll catch you in the next video. Until then, walk on!